Sometimes, life doesn't change with a big plan or a perfect moment. Sometimes, it changes in the middle of chaos on a crowded subway where you're just trying to keep your balance. Think about it. You're exhausted, carrying way too many bags. The train jerks, and before you know it, you land in the lap of a stranger. Embarrassing, right? But what if that stranger isn't just anyone? What if he's a millionaire with everything money can buy, except the one thing he's never dared to want? And what if that one clumsy accident forces two people from completely different worlds to collide? This isn't just a story about wealth or love. It's about the things money can't fix: guilt, grief, forgiveness, and the crazy, messy ways life pushes us into the arms we least expect. So sit back, because you're about to hear how a subway ride turned into a storm. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The subway car reeked of coffee, sweat, and broken dreams. Flickering fluorescent lights cast shadows that danced across tired faces, each passenger lost in their own world of Monday morning misery. The train groaned and screeched along the tracks, carrying its cargo of souls through the underground maze of the city. Yale Kane adjusted his platinum cufflinks and pulled his noise-canceling headphones tighter over his ears. Even surrounded by noise, he remained untouchable, scrolling through stock reports on his phone. The subway was beneath him, literally and figuratively. But his Bentley was in the shop, and time was money. Every second counted when you controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire at 28. 3 seats away, Lark Eric clutched her grocery bags like lifelines, her knuckles white against the plastic handles. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, souvenirs from another sleepless night juggling 2 jobs and university assignments. Her sneakers, held together with hope and duct tape, tapped nervously against the grimy floor. She was running late. Again. Mrs. Cormack would dock her pay if she showed up past 8:30, and she couldn't afford to lose another dime. The train lurched suddenly, a violent shudder that sent passengers grabbing for handholds. Lark's tired legs betrayed her. Her grocery bags flew wide as she pitched forward, crashing directly into the lap of the immaculate stranger with the expensive headphones. Time stopped. Coffee exploded across Yale's pristine white shirt like a Jackson Pollock painting. Hot liquid soaked through Italian silk, leaving dark stains that would never come out. His phone clattered to the floor, screen cracking against concrete. "Oh God, oh no, I'm so sorry." Lark's voice cracked with mortification. She scrambled to get up, her face burning crimson, but somehow she was tangled in his arms, her grocery bags scattered across the floor. Oranges rolled under seats like escaped prisoners. The entire subway car turned to stare. Someone gasped. Phone cameras emerged like vultures, recording every humiliating second. Yale's jaw clenched so hard it could crack diamonds. This was his nightmare. Public embarrassment, loss of control, weakness displayed for the world to see. But then their eyes met. Lark's gaze was a storm of terror and defiance. Brown eyes wide with panic but blazing with an inner fire that caught him completely off guard. She expected him to push her away, to explode with rage like every other entitled rich man she'd encountered. Instead, Yale found himself frozen, watching the gold flecks in her irises, the way her breath came in quick, frightened gasps. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money or polish, raw, honest, desperately real in a world of plastic perfection. Her dark hair had escaped its ponytail, framing a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, all soft curves and vulnerable strength. For a heartbeat that lasted forever, neither moved. The chaos around them faded to white noise. Yale's hands, still gripping her arms to steady her, felt the rapid flutter of her pulse through her worn sweater. Something deep in his chest, something he'd buried under years of coldness, stirred to life. I'll pay for dry cleaning," Lark whispered, finally finding her voice. She tried to stand, but the train lurched again, sending her tumbling back into his lap with another soft gasp. More camera phones, more whispers, more stares. Yale's rational mind screamed at him to end this spectacle immediately. Shove her away. Demand compensation. Make her disappear. But his body betrayed him, arms tightening protectively around her, as if shielding her from the hungry eyes of strangers. "Don't," he heard himself say, voice rougher than intended. "Don't apologize." The words surprised them both. Lark blinked, confusion replacing terror. Why wasn't he furious? The train screeched to a halt at the next station. Passengers pushed past them in the morning rush. But Yale and Lark remained frozen in their strange embrace, two strangers caught in a moment that would change everything. Finally, Lark managed to untangle herself, gathering her scattered groceries with shaking hands. An apple had rolled to Yale's feet. He bent to retrieve it, their fingers brushing as he handed it back. The simple touch sent electricity racing up both their arms. "Thank you," she breathed, then fled through the opening doors like Cinderella at midnight. Yale sat in stunned silence, coffee staining his shirt, phone cracked, reputation potentially in ruins. But all he could think about was the girl with storm-colored eyes who'd crashed into him and left everything beautifully broken. By noon, the photos had gone viral. "Millionaire's mystery subway lover," screamed the headlines. Yale Kane's secret affair caught on camera. Social media exploded with speculation, conspiracy theories, and romantic fantasies about the handsome millionaire and his mysterious subway girl. Yale's assistant, Elias, burst into his corner office with a tablet full of notifications. "Sir, we have a situation. The photos are everywhere. The board is asking questions. Stock prices are fluctuating. We need damage control immediately." Yale stared out his floor-to-ceiling windows at the city sprawling below, but all he could see were brown eyes and tangled hair. "Find her." "Sir?" "The girl. Find her." Elias blinked rapidly. "To sue her? Press charges?" "No." Yale's voice carried a strange new quality. "To make her an offer." 3 days later, Lark was running late for her evening nanny shift when she spotted the black sedan parked outside her crumbling apartment building. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Rich people didn't come to this neighborhood unless someone was in trouble. The rear window rolled down, revealing the face that had haunted her dreams since Monday morning. Yale Kane looked different in person than in the photos, but his eyes were the same ice blue that had held her captive on the subway. "Get in," he said simply. Lark clutched her backpack straps. "Look, I already told you I'd pay for the dry cleaning. I don't have much, but get in the car, Lark, please." The fact that he knew her name sent chills down her spine. Of course he'd found her. Men like him could find anyone. Against every instinct screaming danger, she slid into the leather interior that probably cost more than her rent. The door closed with a whisper-soft click, sealing them in together. "How do you know my name?" "I know lots of things." His voice was carefully neutral, businessman smooth. Lark Eric, 23, studying early childhood education at Metro Community College. You work 2 jobs, nanny for the Cormac and weekend shifts at Sal's Diner. You live alone in a studio apartment with a leaky ceiling and a temperamental heater. Are you stalking me? I'm protecting my interests. He pulled out a leather folder, extracting photographs that made Lark's stomach plummet. The subway photos, magnified and enhanced, showing every intimate detail of their collision. Her face was clearly visible now, no longer anonymous. "These pictures have been viewed 20 million times in 3 days. The media is calling you my secret girlfriend. My reputation is at stake." Lark's hands shook as she stared at herself sprawled across his lap, looking for all the world like a woman in the throes of passion instead of a clumsy disaster. "I never asked for this." "Neither did I." His jaw tightened. "But here we are. The story won't die." Every business magazine, gossip rag, and social media influencer in the country is speculating about our relationship. My board of directors thinks I'm having some kind of breakdown. My competitors are watching for weakness. "So what do you want from me?" The question came out smaller than she intended. Yale turned to face her fully, ice blue eyes boring into her soul. "I want you to be my girlfriend." Lark choked on her own breath. "What?" "Not really. A performance. 6 months of carefully orchestrated public appearances. You'll play the role of the woman who captured my heart. In return, I'll pay your tuition in full, plus enough to cover your living expenses so you can quit those soul-crushing jobs and focus on school." The offer hung between them. Lark's mind reeled with the impossibility of it all. You want me to lie? To everyone? For 6 months? I want you to save both our reputations. The media loves a good love story. We give them what they want. Romance, passion, a modern fairy tale. When it runs its course, we have a mutual, amicable breakup. You disappear back into your normal life with a degree and no debt. I return to business as usual with my credibility intact. It sounded so simple, so clinical. Like a business merger instead of pretending to be in love with the most dangerous man she'd ever met. And if I say no, Yale's expression didn't change, then you say no. I won't force you. But the photos will keep circulating. The speculation will continue. Eventually, some reporter will dig deep enough to find your real name, your address, your family. Your privacy will be destroyed regardless, but you'll have nothing to show for it. The threat was delivered with silk-wrapped steel, polite but unmistakable. Lark thought of her studio apartment with its broken heater, her maxed-out credit cards, the rejection letters from universities she couldn't afford. She thought of her brother Danny, paralyzed and struggling, needing care she couldn't provide. But mostly, she thought of the way this man had looked at her on the subway, not with disgust or anger, but with something that had made her forget to breathe. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could have any woman you wanted, models, actresses, socialites who actually know how to play this game." For the first time since she'd entered the car, Yale's perfect composure cracked slightly. His fingers drummed against his knee, a tell so subtle she almost missed it. "Because," he said finally, voice quieter than before, "you're real. And I haven't met anyone real in a very long time." The admission hung between them, raw and honest, and completely unexpected. Lark stared at him, seeing past the expensive suit and cold exterior to something vulnerable underneath. 6 months, she heard herself say. 6 months. And then we're done. No strings, no complications. Clean break, I promise. Lark knew she was about to make either the best or worst decision of her life. But looking into Yale Kane's ice-blue eyes, feeling the pull of something dangerous. "Okay," she whispered, "I'll do it." Yale's smile was sharp as winter sunlight, beautiful and cutting. "Welcome to my world, Lark Eric. Try not to get lost in it." As the sedan pulled away from her broken-down neighborhood, toward a future she couldn't imagine, Lark wondered if she had made the best decision of her life. But even as fear coiled in her stomach, she couldn't shake the memory of his arms around her, protecting instead of pushing away. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to Yale Kane than ice and ambition. Maybe this wouldn't be the disaster she expected. She was wrong about that. It would be so much worse. And so much better. The first date was scheduled for Thursday night at Le Bernardin, the kind of restaurant where meals cost so much. Yale's assistant had delivered a garment bag to her apartment that afternoon, containing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than her car, if she'd had a car. Lark stared at herself in her cracked bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. The dress fit like it had been sewn directly onto her body, transforming her from struggling student into something that belonged in Yale's glittering world. But she still felt like a fraud, a little girl playing dress-up in her mother's closet. The sedan arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. This time Yale sat beside her instead of across from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and clean that made her dizzy. He wore a clean blue suit, every line perfect, every detail precise. "Nervous?" he asked, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. "Terrified," she admitted, then immediately regretted her honesty. This was supposed to be a performance. She should be playing the part of a woman confident enough to catch a millionaire's attention. Something almost like amusement flickered across his features. "Good. If you weren't nervous, I'd be worried about your survival instincts." The restaurant was everything Lark had expected. All soft lighting, crystal glasses, and hushed conversations conducted in French. Other diners turned to stare as they were seated at a prime table near the window, some bold enough to raise their phones for discreet photos. Yale ordered wine that cost more per glass than Lark made in a day, speaking fluent French to the sommelier. She felt completely out of her depth, a sparrow among peacocks. "Relax," Yale murmured as the wine arrived. "You look like you're about to bolt." "Maybe, because I am." Lark gripped her wineglass like a lifeline. "This is insane, Yale. Look around. These people can tell. I'm going to ruin everything." "You're doing fine." His voice was patient, but she caught the slight edge of irritation. This was a business transaction for him, nothing more. Her nervousness was just another problem to manage. The first course arrived, something artistic and tiny that Lark couldn't identify. She watched Yale eat with practiced elegance, every movement calculated for the watching crowd. This was his world, his stage. She was just a prop in his carefully orchestrated performance. "Tell me about yourself," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. The command was phrased like interest, but his eyes remained cold, distant. "How did we meet?" "Right. The story they'd rehearsed in the car." "Coffee shop," she replied dutifully. "You spilled espresso on my textbook. I yelled at you for not watching where you were going. And I was charmed by your honesty." His smile was camera-ready, perfect for the phones recording their every interaction. But it never reached his eyes. They went through the motions. Scripted conversation, calculated touches, practiced laughter at his perfectly timed jokes. Lark felt like a marionette, dancing to strings she couldn't see. This wasn't a date. It was a board meeting with better wine. By the main course, her nerves had transformed into something else entirely: frustration. Yale treated her like an employee, someone to be managed and directed. Every word was choreographed, every gesture analyzed for its potential impact on his precious reputation. "You know," she said, abandoning the script entirely, "for someone pretending to be madly in love, you're about as romantic as a tax audit." Yale's fork paused halfway to his mouth. A flash of genuine surprise crossed his eyes before his practiced mask slipped back into place. "Excuse me?" "Nothing." Lark took a large gulp of wine. "Just wondering if you actually know how to have a conversation that isn't scripted by your PR team. I'm paying you to follow the script." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, ice creeping into those blue eyes. "You're paying me to pretend to be your girlfriend." Girlfriends don't recite talking points like robots. For a moment, she thought he might end their arrangement right there in front of the crystal and candlelight. His jaw tightened, fingers gripping his wineglass with enough force to crack the stem. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was nothing like his practiced camera-ready chuckle. This laugh was real, rusty, as if he hadn't used it in years, but genuinely amused. Several nearby diners turned to stare, clearly surprised to hear such an unguarded sound from the notoriously controlled Yale Kane. "You're right," he admitted, and for the first time all evening he actually looked at her instead of through her. "I haven't had an unscripted conversation in so long I'd forgotten what they sound like." "It shows." Lark leaned back in her chair, emboldened by his unexpected honesty. "When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it was good for business?" Yale considered the question seriously, which surprised her. She'd expected another cold deflection, another reminder of their professional boundaries. "I don't remember," he said finally, and the admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Something shifted between them then, a crack in the perfect facade, a glimpse of the man hiding beneath the marble statue. For just a moment, Yale Kane wasn't a millionaire, or a brand, or a constructed image. He was just a man who'd forgotten how to be human. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," Lark said softly. Their eyes met across the table, and this time there was no performance, no audience to consider. Just two people seeing each other clearly for the first time. The moment shattered when Yale's phone buzzed against the table. His expression immediately shuddered as he glanced at the screen. Businessman mode slamming back into place. "We should go," he said, signaling for the check. "I have an early meeting." The ride back to her apartment was conducted in silence, the fragile connection they'd discovered buried under layers of professional distance. But Lark caught him watching her in the reflection of the window with no expression. "Same time Tuesday?" he asked as the sedan pulled up to her building. "It's a date," she replied, then winced at her poor choice of words. Yale's mouth quirked upward. Not his practiced smile, but something smaller and more real. Yes, it is. As Lark climbed the 3 flights to her studio apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that something little had changed between them. Yale Kane was supposed to be her employer, nothing more. A means to an end, a solution to her financial problems. But the man who'd laughed at her honesty, who'd admitted to forgetting how to want things for himself, that man was dangerous in ways she hadn't anticipated. Because that man she could fall for. Hard. And that was absolutely not part of the deal. 3 dates in, and the media was eating it up. Photos of them at galleries, restaurants, and charity events dominated social media. The narrative was perfect. Reclusive millionaire, melted by mysterious beauty, love conquering all, fairy tale romance for the modern age. If only they could see what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. "You're holding my hand wrong," Yale said as they walked through Central Park, maintaining his practiced smile for the paparazzi trailing them at a discreet distance. "There's a wrong way to hold hands?" Lark squeezed his fingers tighter, partly to annoy him and partly because she liked the way his skin felt against hers. "You're supposed to look lovesick, not like you're dragging me to my execution." "Maybe because I am dragging you to your execution. When's the last time you actually walked through a park instead of being driven past one?" Yale opened his mouth to deliver what she was sure would be another cold deflection, then closed it again. She was getting better at reading him, learning to recognize the moments when her questions hit their mark. "I used to come here with my mother," he said quietly, "before she died. We'd feed the ducks, ride the carousel. She said parks were for dreaming." The admission was so unexpected, so raw, that Lark stopped walking entirely. Yale's mother had died in a car accident when he was 12. She'd read about it in the background research she'd done after agreeing to this arrangement. But hearing him mention her, hearing the pain still fresh in his voice after 16 years, cracked something open in her chest. What would she think of this? Lark gestured between them, encompassing their fake relationship and the photographers documenting their every move. Yale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She'd hate it. She always said the best things in life can't be bought or sold. He glanced down at their joined hands, thumb brushing across her knuckles. "She would have liked you, though. You're real in a way she always tried to be." Before Lark could respond to that devastating admission, Yale's phone rang. His assistant's name flashed across the screen, and just like that, the moment dissolved. His expression shuddered, businessman mode engaged, the vulnerable man who missed his mother buried under layers of professional armor. But as they continued their walk, his hand stayed firmly wrapped around hers. Not for the cameras this time. The photographers had moved on to easier targets. This was something else, something neither of them was ready to name. By their 5th public appearance, Lark had learned to navigate Yale's world with something approaching confidence. She could identify the difference between a salad fork and a dessert fork, knew which topics were safe for public consumption, and which would send Yale's jaw into that dangerous clench that meant she'd overstepped. But she was also learning other things. The way his eyes went distant when people asked about his childhood, how his shoulders tensed when business rivals approached their table, the fact that he never, ever let himself be photographed eating dessert because sugar was a sign of weakness in his world. It was insane. All of it. The rigid rules, the constant performance, the way he'd trained himself to see every human interaction as a potential threat to his empire. No wonder he'd forgotten how to want things for himself. He'd spent so many years viewing his own desires as liabilities. "You realize you're allowed to enjoy yourself, right?" she asked one evening as they left yet another charity event where Yale had written checks with more zeros than Lark's brain could process. "I'm working," he replied automatically. "You're always working. Even when you're sleeping, I bet you dream about quarterly reports." Yale's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Profit margins, actually. That's even sadder than I thought possible." They were in the elevator of his building now, rising toward the suite where Yale lived in isolation. Lark had never seen his home, but she could picture it perfectly, all cold marble and sterile perfection, beautiful and completely lifeless. "Come up," Yale said suddenly as the elevator approached her floor. Lark's heart skipped. What? For coffee, or wine, or... He trailed off, looking as surprised by his own invitation as she was. "I don't know, I'm not ready for the evening to end." It was the most honest thing he'd said to her in weeks. Because Lark wasn't ready for the evening to end either, and that was a problem she hadn't anticipated when she'd agreed to this arrangement. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but I should warn you. I have strong opinions about coffee, and wine, and pretty much everything else." Yale's smile this time was real, transforming his entire face. "I'm counting on it." As the elevator carried them toward whatever came next, Lark realized she was in serious trouble. Because somewhere between the scripted dates and practiced smiles, she'd stopped pretending to fall for Yale Kane. She was actually falling for him, against her better judgment. And that wasn't part of the deal at all. Yale's suite was exactly what Lark had expected. A monument to wealth and isolation perched 60 floors above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that cost more per square foot than most people's homes, but the space felt hollow, like a magazine spread designed to impress rather than comfort. "It's very," Lark searched for a diplomatic word as Yale poured wine from a bottle. "Sterile," he suggested, handing her a glass. "Impersonal? Completely devoid of human warmth?" "I was going to say clean, but those work too." Yale's laugh was becoming less rusty with practice. "My decorator called it modern minimalism. I call it expensive emptiness." Lark wandered toward the windows, wine warming her blood and loosening her tongue. The city sparkled below them like scattered diamonds, beautiful and distant. "When was the last time you had people over? Real people, not business associates." "Define real people." The question was meant to deflect, but Lark heard the loneliness buried beneath his practiced indifference. She turned to study him, this man who could buy anything he wanted except human connection. People who care about you, not your bank account. People who would still want to spend time with you if you lost everything tomorrow. Yale was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass like tea leaves that might reveal uncomfortable truths. "I can't remember the last time I was certain someone's motives were pure." "That's heartbreaking. That's reality." His voice carried no self-pity, just the weary acceptance of someone who'd learned to expect the worst from human nature. "Everyone wants something, Lark. You want tuition money. My board wants profits. My father's old friends want access to my resources. At least you're honest about your price." The casual dismissal stung more than it should have, because somewhere over the past few weeks, Lark had started to forget about the money, started to care about the man hiding. "Is that really what you think? That I'm only here for your checkbook?" Yale set down his wine glass, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. "Aren't you?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Lark could lie, stick to the safe boundaries of their arrangement. Or she could tell him the truth that had been growing in her chest like a dangerous flower. "At first, yes," she admitted. "The money, the tuition, it was everything I needed to change my life. But then you told me about your mother, about feeding ducks in Central Park. And you laughed at my terrible jokes even when no cameras were watching. And I realized..." "What?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the countertop. "I realized I was starting to care about you. The real you, not the billionaire persona or the media image. Just Yale." The admission settled between them like a live wire, electric and dangerous. Yale's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or fear. "That's not part of our deal," he said quietly. "I know." Lark moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "It should terrify me. You should terrify me. But you don't." "I should." Yale's voice was rough now, all pretense abandoned. "I destroy everything I touch, Lark. It's what I'm good at." "I don't believe that." "Then you're naive. Or maybe you're just scared." The words hit their mark. Yale flinched as if she'd struck him, ice-blue eyes flashing with something raw and vulnerable. Scared of what? Of letting someone see past the armor, of caring about something you can't control or acquire or destroy. Lark was close enough now to see the flecks of gray in his eyes, of being human instead of a brand. For a moment, she thought he might close the distance between them. His gaze dropped to her mouth, and the air crackled with tension that had nothing to do with their fake relationship, and everything to do with the very real attraction between them. Then his phone rang. The spell shattered instantly. Yale stepped back as if she'd burned him, professional mask slamming into place as he answered the call. Kane, no, the Tokyo deal can't wait until morning. I don't care what time it is there. Lark watched him disappear into the businessman who'd first approached her in that black sedan, cold and calculating and completely untouchable. The man who'd almost kissed her might have been a mirage. I have to take this, he said, covering the phone with his palm. Elias will arrange your ride home. The dismissal was polite but absolute. Lark had been temporarily useful for his emotional education, but now business was calling, and she was just another distraction to be managed. Of course, she said, setting down her wine glass. Work always comes first. Something flickered across Yale. Regret, maybe, or frustration. But he was already moving toward his home office, phone pressed to his ear, the moment lost. Lark saw herself out, pride stinging more than her heart. This was what she got for forgetting the rules of their arrangement. Yale Kane might be learning to be human, but he was still fundamentally a man who valued control above all else. And she was still just the girl he was paying to play pretend. The shift in their dynamic was subtle, but undeniable. Yale became more attentive during their public appearances, touching her more, looking at her with something that could pass for genuine affection, playing the devoted boyfriend with Oscar-worthy conviction. But privately he'd retreated behind walls that seemed higher than ever. Their conversations stayed carefully surface level, focused on logistics and scheduling rather than the raw honesty they'd begun to share. It was exactly what Lark had expected from their arrangement, so why did it feel like losing something precious? You're glowing, her friend Odette observed as they grabbed coffee between Lark's classes. All this fake dating is agreeing with you. It's not fake dating, it's performance art, Lark corrected weakly. Maya raised an eyebrow. Performance art that has you checking your phone every 30 seconds and smiling like you've got a secret? Lark's cheeks warmed. Was she that obvious? Yale and I have a business arrangement. Nothing more. Uh-huh. And I'm secretly a Victoria's Secret model. Odette leaned forward, dark eyes sparkling with mischief. Come on, Lark. I've seen the photos. The way he looks at you, that's not acting. Before Lark could protest, her phone buzzed with a text from Yale. Dinner tonight. Le Cirque, 8 p.m. Wear the blue dress. Even his text messages were commands disguised as invitations. Lark found herself simultaneously irritated and excited, which pretty much summed up her entire relationship with Yale Kane. See? Odette grinned. You're doing that glowing thing again. Lark shoved her phone back into her bag, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. I'm not glowing. I'm strategically illuminated. That evening, Lark arrived at Le Cirque to find Yale already seated at their usual table. But he wasn't alone. 3 men in expensive suits occupied the surrounding chairs, all sharp smiles and calculating eyes. Business associates, she realized with sinking heart. This wasn't a date. It was a meeting where she was expected to play the adoring girlfriend accessory. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Lark, Yale said as she approached, rising to pull out her chair with practiced gallantry. Lark, these are my partners in the Singapore project. Richard Morrison, James Holden, and David Jett. The men rose politely, all handshakes and charm. But Lark caught the way their eyes assessed her like a commodity. She'd seen that look before. Men measuring her worth based on her usefulness to Yale rather than any inherent value. Lovely to meet you, Richard said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yale's told us so much about you. All good things, I hope, Lark replied, settling into her role with practiced ease. The dinner proceeded exactly as she'd expected. Yale's attention split between her and business, the other men treating her like an attractive but ultimately irrelevant addition to their boys' club. She smiled and nodded and played the part of the supportive girlfriend while they discussed mergers and acquisitions over courses. "So, Lark," James said during dessert, his tone carrying that particular blend of condescension wealthy men reserve for women they considered beneath their notice, "what do you do when you're not gracing us with your beauty?" The question was designed to highlight exactly how little she belonged in their world. Lark felt Yale's attention sharpen beside her, waiting to see how she'd handle the barely veiled insult. "I study early childhood education," she replied evenly. "I want to teach kindergarten." "How noble," David murmured, the word dripping with barely concealed disdain. "Though I imagine Yale can provide much more interesting opportunities than finger painting with 5-year-olds. The implication was crystal clear. Why would she waste time with a meaningless career when she could be a trophy wife instead? Lark felt her temper flare, but Yale's hand found hers under the table, fingers tightening in warning. "Teaching is important work," Yale said, his voice carrying an edge that made all three men straighten slightly. "Shaping young minds, building the foundation for everything that comes after. I have tremendous respect for educators." The defense was unexpected and fiercely protective. Lark felt something warm unfurl in her chest, even as she recognized the performance aspect of his support. "Of course." Richard backtracked quickly, clearly recognizing they'd overstepped. "We meant no offense. It's just unusual to see someone in your position with such traditional ambitions." "My position?" Lark's voice stayed level, but Yale could probably feel the tension rising. "You mean as someone who works for a living?" Silence followed. Yale's grip on her hand tightened, but she was past caring about diplomatic niceties. These men saw her as nothing more than Yale's temporary plaything, someone to be tolerated until he moved on to more appropriate company. "Gentlemen," Yale's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "I think we've covered enough business for one evening." Within minutes, the three men had made their excuses and disappeared into the night, leaving Yale and Lark alone at their table surrounded by the detritus of an uncomfortable meal. "I'm sorry," Yale said quietly. "They were out of line." "Were they?" Lark pulled her hand free, reaching for her wine glass with fingers that trembled slightly. "Or were they just saying what everyone in your world thinks? That I'm a pretty distraction until you get bored and move on to someone more suitable?" Yale's jaw tightened. "That's not. It's exactly what this is." The wine made her bold. Or maybe it was just weeks of pretending that had finally worn her down. "I'm your temporary girlfriend, your 6-month performance piece. When our contract is up, you'll go back to your real life and I'll disappear back into mine like this never happened." That was always the deal. "I know." The admission hurt more than it should have. "I just forgot for a while that it was all pretend." A flicker of emotion crossed Yale's face. Pain, maybe, or regret. But when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "It's better this way. Cleaner. We both get what we need without complications." Lark laughed, the sound hollow in the elegant restaurant. "Right. Can't have complications in your perfectly ordered world." She stood to leave, but Yale's hand shot out to catch her wrist. His touch burned through her skin like a brand. "Lark, wait. Why?" She turned to face him, and for a moment his mask slipped completely. The man looking back at her was raw, vulnerable, desperate in a way that made her chest ache. "Give me one good reason why I should stay and pretend this means something when we both know it doesn't." Yale opened his mouth, then closed it again. Whatever words he might have said died unspoken, killed by years of conditioning that taught him to value control over connection. "I can't," he said finally, and the admission destroyed them both. Lark pulled free of his grip, gathering her dignity around her like armor. "Then I guess we both know where we stand." She walked away without looking back, but she could feel his eyes on her until she disappeared into the night. Behind her, Yale sat alone at their table. The next morning brought a delivery that made Lark's heart sink. A jewelry box containing diamond earrings. The note was written in Yale's precise handwriting for the charity gala on Saturday. They'll compliment the silver dress. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened between them. Just another costume piece for their ongoing performance. Lark stared at the diamonds sparkling in the morning light and realized she was falling in love with a man who saw her as nothing more than a beautiful accessory. A man who'd rather buy her silence than deal with the messy reality of human emotion. She should end their arrangement. Cut her losses, take whatever money he'd already paid, and disappear back into her real life before she got hurt any worse. Instead, she put on the earrings and the silver dress and met him at the charity gala with a smile. The evening passed in a blur of champagne and small talk, Yale's arm around her waist like a brand of ownership. He was the perfect gentleman, attentive, charming, everything a devoted boyfriend should be. But Lark could feel the distance between them like a physical thing, growing wider with every performed smile and calculated touch. "You're magnificent tonight," he murmured during a slow dance, his breath warm against her ear. "Thank you," she replied, her voice as cool as his eyes. "The earrings really complete the ensemble." Yale flinched at the barb, but his smile never wavered. They were performing for an audience of hundreds, their fake romance, the fairy tale everyone wanted to believe in. If only they could see how empty it felt behind the glittering facade. As the evening wound down, Lark excused herself to the ladies' room, needing a moment away from the suffocating performance. She touched up her lipstick with mechanical precision, staring at herself in the mirror and trying to recognize the woman looking back. When had she become this polished stranger in borrowed clothes and diamond jewelry? When had she started caring more about Yale's approval than her own self-respect? Lark? She turned to find a woman she didn't recognize. Elegant, perfectly put together, with the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. "I'm Catherine Morrison," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "Richard's wife. I wanted to introduce myself properly after that unfortunate dinner the other night." Lark shook the offered hand, wariness prickling along her spine. "Nice to meet you. I hope you'll forgive my husband's rudeness. Men in Yale's circle can be territorial about protecting their investments." The words were delivered with a smile, but Lark caught the subtle malice underneath. "I'm sorry?" "Oh, my dear." Catherine's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Surely you don't think you're the first. Yale has a type. Beautiful, innocent, completely inappropriate for his actual social circle. There was the artist 2 years ago, the nurse before that, the veterinarian who lasted almost 8 months. Each revelation hit like a physical blow." Lark kept her expression neutral through sheer force of will, but inside she was crumbling. "The pattern is always the same," Catherine continued, clearly enjoying the devastation she was causing. "He plays the devoted boyfriend for a few months, makes them fall completely in love with him, then moves on when the novelty wears off. They all think they're special, of course. They all believe they're the one who'll change him." "Excuse me," Lark managed, pushing past Catherine toward the door. "The smart ones take the money and disappear quietly," Catherine called after her. "The foolish ones think love conquers all. Guess we'll see which category you fall into." Lark barely made it to the hallway before her composure shattered. She leaned against the marble wall, struggling to breathe as Catherine's words echoed in her mind. She wasn't special. She wasn't different. She was just the latest in a long line of women Yale used and discarded when they became inconvenient. "There you are." Yale appeared around the corner, looking concerned. "You've been gone for—" "Lark, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, this beautiful, damaged man who'd made her believe in fairy tales, and felt her heart break completely. "Nothing," she said, straightening her shoulders and rebuilding her walls with desperate efficiency. "Nothing's wrong. Shall we go?" Yale studied her with those two perceptive eyes, clearly sensing something had shifted. But he didn't press, didn't demand explanations. He simply offered his arm like the perfect gentleman he'd been trained to be. As they left the gala together, Lark realized she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Yale Kane was exactly who he'd always claimed to be, a man who destroyed everything he touched. She just hadn't expected him to destroy her quite so thoroughly. The revelation about Yale's previous relationships hit Lark L and left her reeling for days. She threw herself into her studies and work shifts, trying to drown out Catherine Morrison's poisonous words with the familiar rhythm of her real life. But even as she served coffee at Sal's diner and chased after the Henderson children, she couldn't shake the image of Yale's other women, the artist, the nurse, the veterinarian who'd lasted 8 months. Had they all started like her, convinced they were different? Had they all fallen for his rare moments of vulnerability, his glimpses of humanity beneath the marble facade? Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Yale about upcoming appearances, but she kept her responses professional, distant. If this was just another performance in his repertoire, she'd play her part until the contract ended. Nothing more. "You look like someone kicked your puppy," Odette observed during their usual coffee meet-up. "Trouble in fake paradise?" Lark stirred sugar into her cup with mechanical precision. "Just tired. The schedule is intense." "Uh-huh." Odette's dark eyes were sharp with concern. "This wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that you haven't mentioned Yale's name once in the past week? Usually I can't shut you up about his latest romantic gesture or confusing behavior. There are no romantic gestures. It's a business arrangement." "Lark." Maya reached across the table to still her restless stirring. "What happened?" The gentle question broke something loose in Lark's chest. Before she could stop herself, the whole story came tumbling out. Catherine Morrison's revelations, the pattern of women Yale had used and discarded, the crushing realization that she was just another temporary distraction. "That bitch," Odette said when Lark finished. "She was trying to hurt you. But what if she was telling the truth?" Lark's voice cracked. "What if I'm just another naive girl who thought she was special?" Odette was quiet for a long moment, studying her friend with the intensity of someone who'd known her since childhood. "Do you love him?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Lark had been avoiding that particular truth, burying it under layers of rationalization and self-protection. "Yes," she whispered, and saying it out loud made it real, made it hurt. "God help me, I love him. Then fight for him." "Odette." "No, listen to me." Maya leaned forward, fierce and protective. "I've watched you work 3 jobs to keep yourself afloat, seen you sacrifice everything for your education and your family. You don't give up when things get hard. So why are you giving up on this?" "Because this isn't something I can win through hard work and determination. Yale doesn't want to be saved. He's made that perfectly clear." "Has he? Or are you assuming the worst because you're scared of getting hurt?" The accusation stung because it held more than a grain of truth. Lark had spent her life expecting disappointment, building walls to protect herself from the kind of pain that came hoping for too much. "Even if Catherine was lying, even if Yale actually cares about me, what then? We come from completely different worlds. His friends barely tolerate me. His business associates think I'm a gold digger, and he's Yale Kane. He could have anyone. But he chose you." Maya's voice was gentle, but implacable. "Out of all the women throwing themselves at him, all the socialites and models and actresses who'd kill for his attention, he chose you. That has to mean something." Lark wanted to believe it, wanted to cling to Odette's optimism like a life raft. But Catherine's words echoed in her mind. "They all think they're special." "I don't know how to tell the difference between what's real and what's performance anymore." "Then ask him." "Odette, seriously. You're both adults. You're both clearly miserable with this fake relationship nonsense. Talk to each other. Find out where you actually stand." That evening, Lark stood outside Yale's building, nerves eating at her stomach like acid. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say a dozen times, but every scenario ended with humiliation or heartbreak. Still, Odette was right about one thing. She'd never been someone who gave up without a fight. The elevator ride to Yale's suite felt endless. When the doors finally opened, she found him standing at his windows, silhouetted against the city lights. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion, shoulders carrying the weight of an empire that demanded everything and gave nothing back. "Lark." He turned, looking surprised. "I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk." Something in her tone made his expression sharpen. "About? About us. About this arrangement. About whether any of it's real. or if I'm just the latest in a long line of women you use for entertainment. Yale went very still. Who told you about? Does it matter? Lark stepped into the room, chin raised in challenge. Catherine Morrison was very educational. The artist, the nurse, the veterinarian who lasted 8 months. Apparently, I'm following a well-established pattern. Catherine Morrison is a vicious gossip who told me the truth. Lark's voice cracked despite her efforts to stay strong. Am I just another project, Yale? Another broken woman for you to fix and discard when you get bored? Yale's composure cracked, ice blue eyes flashing with something raw and desperate. No, he said fiercely. God, no, you're nothing like them. Then what am I? The question came out smaller than she'd intended, all her walls crumbling at once. Because I'm falling in love with you and I need to know if I'm just setting myself up for devastation. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither dared to cross. Yale stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language, his expression cycling through shock, fear, and something that might have been hope. You can't, he said finally. Can't what? Love you? Too late for that. You don't understand. Yale raked his hands through his hair, perfect composure dissolving into something achingly human. I destroy everything good in my life. It's what I do, who I am. My father taught me that emotions are weaknesses to be exploited, that caring about anything makes you vulnerable. I've spent 15 years building walls to protect myself, and everyone who gets close pays the price. So you hurt them before they can hurt you? I hurt them because I don't know how not to. The confession tore from his throat. Those women Catherine told you about. They were all good people who deserved better than what I gave them. I cared about them in my way, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to. How to what? How to love them back. The words were barely audible, weighted with years of self-loathing. How to be the man they needed, instead of the monster my father created. Lark's heart broke for him, for the boy who'd lost his mother too young, for the man who'd been taught that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. But beneath the sympathy was something stronger, a fierce determination to prove him wrong. You're not a monster, Yale. You don't know me. Not really. You've seen glimpses, moments when I let my guard down, but underneath I'm exactly what you'd expect. Cold, calculating, ruthless. I've destroyed companies, ruined lives, made decisions that cost people everything they had. That's who I am. That's who you think you have to be. Lark moved closer, drawn by his pain like a moth to flame. But I've seen the real you. I've seen you laugh at terrible jokes and talk about your mother with tears in your eyes. I've seen you defend me to your business associates and look at homeless people like they matter. That man isn't a monster. Yale's laugh was bitter, self-deprecating. That man is a fantasy, a performance I put on when I forget to be careful. Or maybe the monster is the performance. Maybe the real Yale is the one who fed ducks with his mother and misses having unscripted conversations. For a moment, hope flickered in his eyes. Then reality crashed back, and his walls slammed into place with devastating finality. It doesn't matter, he said, voice going cold and distant. Even if you're right, even if there's something worth saving in me, I won't risk destroying you too. You deserve better than what I can give you. Don't I get a say in what I deserve? No. The word was final, absolute. Our contract runs for another 3 months. We'll fulfill our obligations, maintain the public facade, and then you'll walk away with your tuition paid and your dignity intact. That's the deal. The dismissal cut deeper than anything Catherine Morrison had said. This was Yale at his most ruthless, protecting himself by destroying what threatened his world. Fine, Lark said, pride coming to her rescue when her heart failed her. If that's what you want, it's what's best for both of us. She nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. As she turned to leave, Yale's voice stopped her at the elevator. Lark! She looked back to find him silhouetted against the windows again, looking more alone than anyone should ever have to be. For what it's worth, I wish things could be different. So do I, she whispered, and stepped into the elevator before he could see her cry. As the doors closed between them, Lark realized she'd gotten her answer. Yale did care about her. Maybe even loved her in his damaged, complicated way. But he was too afraid of his own capacity for destruction to fight for what they could have together. And she was too tired of being treated like something fragile to keep breaking her heart against his walls. The next 3 months stretched ahead of them like a prison sentence, filled with fake smiles and performed affection and the agonizing knowledge of what they were both throwing away. But first, Lark had to figure out how to survive loving a man who was determined to stay lost. The weeks following their confrontation settled into a rhythm of exquisite torture. Publicly, Yale and Lark were the perfect couple, attending galas, sharing intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through Central Park while photographers captured their every moment. The media ate up every staged interaction, declaring their love story the romance of the century. Privately, they barely spoke beyond the necessities of their arrangement. Yale retreated behind his walls, treating Lark like a business associate instead of the woman who'd confessed her love. He was polite, professional, and completely untouchable. Their conversations stayed strictly surface level, focused on schedules and appearances rather than anything resembling genuine connection. For her part, Lark threw herself into the performance with determination. If Yale wanted a perfectly controlled girlfriend who didn't complicate his carefully ordered world, she'd give him exactly that. She smiled when required, laughed at his jokes for the cameras, and played the part of a woman blissfully in love while her heart slowly crumbled to dust. It was Odette who finally called her on it. "You look like you're dying," her friend said bluntly as they sat in their usual coffee shop, surrounded by the chaos of real life. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't catered by people in bow ties?" Lark poked at her muffin without appetite. "I eat. Picking at 5-course meals doesn't count." Odette leaned forward, dark eyes sharp with concern. "This isn't working, Lark. Whatever happened between you and Prince Charming, it's killing you." "Only 2 more months." The words came out hollow, automatic. "Then it's over and I can go back to my real life." "What if you don't want to go back? What if you want to fight for him?" Lark's laugh held no humor. "You can't fight someone who refuses to show up for battle. Yale's made his choice. I'm respecting it." "By slowly disappearing into this fake version of yourself?" "The Lark I know doesn't give up. She doesn't let other people decide her worth." The accusation stung because it was true. Somewhere along the way, Lark had stopped being herself and started being whoever Yale needed her to be. She'd let his fears and walls dictate the terms of their relationship, accepting crumbs of affection when she deserved the whole feast. But before she could respond to Maya's challenge, her phone buzzed with a text from Yale. "Emergency. Can you meet me at Mercy General Hospital?" Now, Lark's blood turned to ice. Hospital meant crisis. Meant something had gone terribly wrong in Yale's controlled world. She was moving before conscious thought kicked in, grabbing her jacket and running for the subway while texting back, "On my way." Mercy General was controlled chaos. Nurses hustling between rooms, the smell of antiseptic sharp in recycled air, worried families clustered in waiting areas. Lark found Yale pacing outside the ICU. His perfect composure cracked like a broken mirror. "What happened?" she demanded, taking in his disheveled appearance. His tie was loose, shirt wrinkled, hair messed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Car accident." His voice was hollow, mechanical. "Head-on collision with a drunk driver. They've been in surgery for 6 hours." "Who?" "Yale. Who was in the accident?" He looked at her then, ice-blue eyes haunted with a pain so deep it took her breath away. "Your brother," he whispered. "Danny was in the accident." The world tilted sideways. Lark felt the blood drain from her face, heard her heartbeat roaring in her ears like a freight train. Danny, her baby brother, the only family she had left, the reason she'd agreed to Yale's arrangement in the first place. "How?" The word came out as barely a breath. "How do you know about Danny?" Yale's face went gray. For a moment he looked like he might be sick or faint or both. "Because I've been paying for his care. Anonymously. Physical therapy, medications, the new wheelchair, all of it. I've been covering his expenses for the past 2 months. The confession hit like a physical blow. Lark staggered backward, hand clutching the wall for support as the implications crashed over her. "You knew," she breathed. "You knew about Danny this whole time. Lark, you knew my brother was paralyzed, and you never said anything. You let me believe." She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the horrible realization taking shape in her mind. "It wasn't like that. Then what was it like?" Her voice cracked, raw with betrayal and dawning horror. "Tell me, Yale. Tell me why you really chose me for this arrangement." Yale closed his eyes as if the truth physically hurt to speak. "Because Kane Corporation was responsible for Danny's accident." The world stopped spinning entirely. Lark felt like she was drowning, like the hospital floor was dissolving beneath her feet. "What?" "The construction project that collapsed. The one that paralyzed your brother 5 years ago. It was ours. Kane Corporation cut corners on safety inspections, used substandard materials to save money. When the scaffolding gave way, Danny and 6 other workers were injured. 2 died. Each word landed like a knife between her ribs. Lark stared at him. This man she'd fallen in love with, this man she'd trusted with her heart, and saw a stranger wearing Yale's face. "You knew," she repeated, her voice eerily calm. "You knew that your company destroyed my family, and you still made that deal with me. You still let me." She couldn't finish, couldn't voice the humiliation of loving someone who'd been lying to her from the very beginning. "I didn't plan it." Yale's voice was desperate now, all his careful control abandoned. "When I had you investigated, when I found out about Danny, I nearly called the whole thing off. But then I thought, maybe this was a chance to make things right. To help your family without it seeming like charity or guilt money. Make things right?" Lark's voice climbed toward hysteria. "You thought paying for my brother's care would absolve you of destroying his life? No, You used me." The truth hit with devastating clarity. This whole arrangement, this fake relationship, it wasn't about protecting your reputation from some subway scandal. It was about managing your guilt. You saw an opportunity to ease your conscience by helping the sister of one of your victims, and you took it. That's not true, isn't it? Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. "You never told me about Danny because you knew I'd leave the second I found out. You knew I could never love the man responsible for my brother's paralysis." "Lark, please. How long were you going to keep lying to me? Were you ever going to tell me the truth? Or were you just going to let me live in ignorance forever?" Yale opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence was answer enough. "I can't do this," Lark whispered, backing away from him. "I can't be here with you, knowing what I know." "I can't." A doctor appeared in the doorway behind them, surgical scrubs stained, exhaustion written across her face. "Family of Daniel Eric?" Lark spun around, momentarily forgetting her devastation. "That's me. I'm his sister." The doctor smiled with cautious relief. "The surgery went well. We were able to repair the internal bleeding and set the broken ribs. He's stable now, sleeping off the anesthesia. You can see him in about an hour." "Thank God." Lark sagged against the wall, overwhelming relief replacing her anger for just a moment. Danny was alive. Hurt, but alive. "I should mention," the doctor continued, "your brother is incredibly lucky. The experimental physical therapy he's been receiving has strengthened his core muscles significantly. Without that conditioning, this accident could have been fatal. The therapy Yale had been paying for, the treatment that had just saved Danny's life." Lark looked at Yale standing frozen in the hallway. This complicated, damaged man who'd lied to her about everything, but had also given her brother the gift of survival. "Thank you, doctor," she managed. When the doctor left, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Yale spoke, his voice barely audible. "I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But Danny is alive, and that's all that matters. Don't." Lark held up a hand to stop whatever else he might say. "Don't you dare make this about redemption or forgiveness. You don't get to feel better because your guilt money accidentally saved my brother's life." Yale flinched as if she'd struck him. "That's not—" "Yes, it is." Lark's voice was empty now, drained of everything but exhaustion. "That's exactly what this is." You saw a way to ease your conscience and you took it, regardless of the cost to me. She turned toward the ICU waiting room, then paused without looking back. Our contract is over. Don't contact me again. Lark, I mean it, Yale. I never want to see you again. She walked away then, leaving him standing alone in the hospital corridor surrounded by the wreckage of everything they might have been. Behind her, Yale watched the woman he loved disappear around the corner, taking his heart with her. He'd thought he was protecting her by keeping the truth about Danny's secret. Instead, he'd destroyed the only real connection he'd ever known. For the first time in 15 years, Yale Kane cried. The media had a field day with their abrupt breakup. Photos of Lark leaving the hospital alone sparked endless speculation about what had gone wrong in their fairy tale romance. Yale's representatives issued careful statements about mutual decisions and remaining friends, but the gossip machine wouldn't be satisfied with diplomatic non-answers. Lark ignored it all. She moved through the following days like a ghost, splitting her time between Danny's bedside and her regular responsibilities. Her brother recovered with typical stubborn determination, cracking jokes from his hospital bed and refusing to be coddled despite his injuries. So he said during one of her visits, "Want to tell me why you look like someone ran over your favorite puppy? You were the one who got run over." Lark replied, forcing lightness into her voice. "I should be asking how you're feeling. I feel like I got hit by a truck." Literally. Danny studied her with eyes that were too knowing for someone who'd spent the last week in a medically induced coma. "But that doesn't explain why my sister looks like her world ended. This wouldn't have anything to do with the mysterious benefactor who's been paying for my therapy, would it?" Lark's hands stilled on the flowers she'd been arranging. "What? Come on, Lark. You think I didn't notice when suddenly I could afford the good physical therapy? When my insurance mysteriously started covering experimental treatments? I'm paralyzed, not stupid." She should have known Danny would figure it out. He'd always been too smart for his own good. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Most things worth doing are." Danny reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "Want to tell me about it?" And suddenly, desperately, she did. The whole story came pouring out. The subway accident, Yale's proposal, their fake relationship that had become terrifyingly real, the devastating revelation about Kane Corporation's role in Danny's original accident. Danny listened without interruption, his expression cycling through surprise, anger, and finally something that looked almost like understanding. "So let me get this straight," he said when she finished. "This Yale guy's company was responsible for my accident. He found out who you were during your arrangement, started paying for my care out of guilt, and never told you the truth because he was afraid you'd leave him. That's the simplified version, but yes, and you're in love with him." "It wasn't a question," Lark sighed, slumping in her chair. I thought I was. I don't know anymore." "How can you love someone who's been lying to you from the beginning?" Danny was quiet for a long moment, staring out the hospital window at the city sprawling below. 5 years ago, he said finally, I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life. Angry at the company that cut corners. Angry at the foreman who ignored safety protocols. Angry at God for letting it happen. But mostly I was angry at myself for taking a job I knew was dangerous because I needed the money. "Danny, let me finish." His voice was gentle, but firm. "I spent 2 years drowning in that anger. It was eating me alive, making everything worse. And then one day I realized something. The anger was hurting me more than the accident ever had." Lark felt tears threatening again. "What's your point?" "My point is that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about you, about choosing not to carry poison in your heart just because someone else put it there. He lied to me, Danny, about everything." "Did he? Or did he lie about one thing while being honest about everything else?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did he fake caring about you? Did he pretend to be someone he wasn't? Or did he just hide one terrible truth because he was afraid of losing you?" Lark opened her mouth to insist it was all fake, all manipulation, but the words died in her throat. Because when she really thought about it, when she stripped away her anger and hurt, she could remember moments when Yale's emotions had been achingly real. His laughter when she made terrible jokes. the pain in his eyes when he talked about his mother, the way he'd looked at her in his penthouse like she was something precious and terrifying. "I don't know," she whispered. "Then maybe you should find out." Before Lark could ask what he meant, Danny's door opened to reveal a nurse carrying a massive bouquet of white roses, at least 3 dozen, arranged with the kind of artistic precision that cost serious money. "Another delivery for Mr. Eric," the nurse said cheerfully, setting the flowers on Danny's bedside table next to the dozen other bouquets that had arrived over the past week. Lark frowned. "Who keeps sending these?" Danny plucked the card from the roses with a knowing smile. "Someone who's been sending flowers every day since my accident. Someone who also arranged for the best trauma surgeon in the city to oversee my care, upgraded my room to the VIP wing, and made sure I have round-the-clock nursing coverage." "What?" Lark snatched the card from his fingers, reading the elegant handwriting she recognized instantly. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you heal quickly." "Why? He's been taking care of you," she breathed, "every day since the accident. Never trying to see me, never asking for gratitude or acknowledgement. Just making sure I have everything I need to get better." Danny's expression was serious now, stripped of his usual humor. "That doesn't sound like guilt money to me. That sounds like someone who genuinely cares." Lark stared at the card until the words blurred through her tears. All this time, while she'd been hating Yale for his deception, he'd been quietly ensuring her brother received the best possible care. Not for publicity or absolution, but because it was the right thing to do. "Maybe," Danny said quietly, "the man you fell in love with is exactly who you thought he was. Maybe he just made some terrible choices because he was afraid of losing you. What am I supposed to do with that?" "Whatever you want. But Lark?" Danny squeezed her hand again, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't let fear make your choices for you. I spent 2 years letting anger control my life, and it nearly destroyed me. Don't make the same mistake." That night, Lark sat in her apartment staring at Yale's card and thinking about forgiveness, about second chances, about whether love could survive the kind of betrayal that cuts straight to the bone. Outside her window, the city sparkled with possibilities, each light representing a life, a choice, a chance to start over. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe the question wasn't whether Yale had hurt her, but whether she was brave enough to let him try to heal the damage. Maybe it was time to stop running from the man she loved and start figuring out if he was worth fighting for. But first, she had to decide if she was brave enough to risk her heart one more time. 3 weeks passed in a haze of hospital visits, sleepless nights, and soul-searching that left Lark feeling raw and exposed. Danny continued to recover with remarkable resilience, his room transformed into a garden of white roses that arrived like clockwork every morning. Yale never visited, never called, never tried to force a confrontation, but his presence was felt in every detail of Danny's care, every comfort that money could provide. "He's not going to contact you," Maya said during one of their coffee meetings, her voice gentle but firm. "He thinks he's protecting you by staying away." Lark stirred her latte absently, watching the foam swirl in patterns that reminded her of subway tunnels. "Maybe he's right. Maybe we're too broken to fix. Or maybe you're both too scared to try." Maya leaned forward, dark eyes intense. "Lark, I've watched you fight for everything in your life. Your education, Danny's care, your dreams of teaching. But when it comes to your own happiness, you give up at the first sign of trouble." "This isn't trouble, Maya. This is fundamental dishonesty. He lied about something that destroyed my family. And then spent months trying to fix it in the only way he knew how." Maya's voice carried the patience of someone who'd had this argument before. "Look, I'm not saying what he did was right. Keeping that secret was wrong, and you have every right to be angry. But people make mistakes, especially when they're scared of losing something precious." Lark wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of her weeks ago. Instead, she found herself thinking about Yale's expression in that hospital corridor, the way he'd looked like his world was ending when she walked away. What if I forgive him and he hurts me again? What if you don't and you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been? The question followed Lark home, echoing in her empty apartment as she tried and failed to focus on her textbooks. Every surface seemed to hold memories of Yale. The dress he'd bought for their first dinner, still hanging in her closet like a beautiful ghost. The diamond earring she'd worn to the charity gala, sparkling with the promise of things that might never be. She was drowning in regret when her phone rang. Unknown number, but something made her answer anyway. "Lark?" The voice was unfamiliar, older, refined, with an accent she couldn't place. "This is Catherine Kane, Yale's aunt." Lark's heart stopped. She'd never heard of Catherine Kane, but then again, Yale rarely talked about his family beyond the bare facts of his parents' deaths. "I'm sorry, I don't." "We need to talk," Catherine interrupted, "about my nephew, about what he's been doing since you left him. Please, it's important." An hour later, Lark found herself in the lobby of the Carlisle Hotel, waiting for a woman she'd never met to explain the mysteries of Yale Kane. Catherine arrived precisely on time, elegant, silver-haired, with Yale's ice-blue eyes softened by something that looked like genuine warmth. "Thank you for coming," Catherine said, settling into the chair across from Lark with fluid grace. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Lark studied the older woman, searching for resemblances to the man who'd stolen her heart and shattered it in equal measure. "Why did you want to see me?" Catherine smiled, and suddenly Lark could see the family connection. "Because my nephew is slowly destroying himself, and you're the only person who can stop him." "I don't understand." "Yale has always been difficult, brilliant, driven, completely ruthless when necessary, but also deeply wounded in ways most people never see." Catherine's expression grew thoughtful, tinged with old sadness. When his parents died, he built walls around himself that seemed impenetrable. I thought he'd spend his entire life alone, trapped in that fortress of his own making. And then? And then he met you. Catherine's smile was soft, knowing. For the first time in 15 years, those walls started to come down. He began to remember what it felt like to be human, instead of just a machine designed to accumulate wealth and power. Lark's chest tightened. "He told you about our arrangement?" "He told me he'd found something worth more than his empire and thrown it away because he was too much of a coward to fight for it." Catherine leaned forward, her gaze intense. "The night you left him at the hospital, Yale came to my apartment. He was broken, more broken than I'd seen him since he was 12 years old and crying over his mother's grave." The image hit Lark like a physical blow. She tried to reconcile it with the controlled, untouchable man she knew, but couldn't quite manage it. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to know that he's been trying to make amends, not just with flowers and medical bills, but real changes. He's restructured Kane Corporation's safety protocols, established a foundation for workplace accident victims, donated millions to rehabilitation programs. And he's done it all quietly, without publicity or recognition." Lark's hands trembled slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's also been sitting in his penthouse for 3 weeks, drinking too much and staring at the subway map like it holds the secrets of the universe. Because he resigned from half his boards and stopped attending business meetings. Because the most driven man I've ever known has lost his will to fight for anything except the woman who walked away from him." The confession hit harder than Lark had expected. She'd imagined Yale moving on with cold efficiency, already planning his next conquest. The idea that he might be suffering too hadn't occurred to her. "He lied to me," she whispered, "about something fundamental. How do I get past that?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, studying Lark with eyes that had seen decades of human folly and redemption. "My brother, Yale's father, was not a good man," she said finally. "He taught Yale that emotions were weapons to be used against you, that caring about anything made you weak. Yale spent his entire childhood learning to bury his feelings so deep they couldn't be used to hurt him. That doesn't excuse." "No, it doesn't, but it explains why a man who's never learned how to be vulnerable made the mistake of trying to protect something precious by hiding it instead of fighting for it." Catherine reached across the table to touch Lark's hand. "He didn't lie to manipulate you, dear. He lied because he was terrified of losing you, and fear makes people do stupid things. What if he hurts me again? What if he doesn't? What if he's finally learned that some things are worth the risk? As if summoned by their conversation, Lark's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Subway Platform B, Times Square Station. Tonight at midnight. If you want to understand, come alone. Why Catherine saw her reading and smiled. He's been riding the subway every night since you left. Says it helps him remember what it felt like to be human. You orchestrated this, Lark realized. I made sure you had all the information you needed to make an informed choice. The rest is up to you. That night, Lark stood at the entrance to Times Square Station, heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. She'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on jeans and the same sweater she'd been wearing the day their lives collided in a shower of coffee and shattered certainties. The subway platform at midnight was a different world, quieter, populated by shift workers and insomniacs instead of the usual crowds of commuters and tourists. Lark found Yale sitting alone on a bench in the exact spot where their story had begun, staring at the tracks as if they might reveal the secrets of redemption. He looked different. Thinner, like he hadn't been eating properly. His usually perfect hair was mussed, his expensive suit replaced by jeans, and a simple sweater that made him look younger, more vulnerable. More like the man she'd fallen in love with beneath all the polish and pretense. "You came," he said without looking up. "Your aunt is very persuasive." Lark sat beside him, careful to maintain distance between them. "She says you've been riding the subway every night. It's the only place I can think clearly. The only place that feels real anymore." Yale finally looked at her, and the pain in his ice-blue eyes took her breath away. "I never meant to hurt you, Lark. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but stop." She held up a hand, needing to say her piece before his apologies undermined her resolve. "You lied to me about something that changed my entire life. You let me believe our connection was real while hiding the fact that you'd destroyed my family." "I know. Do you? Do you really understand what that did to me?" Lark turned to face him fully, letting him see the depth of her pain. "I trusted you with everything. My heart, my dreams, my future. And you based that entire relationship on a lie." Yale flinched as if she'd struck him. "The feelings weren't a lie. The way I felt about you, the way you made me want to be better, none of that was fake. But the foundation was rotten." Tears burned behind Lark's eyes, but she blinked them back. "How do you build something real on that kind of deception?" "I don't know." The admission was raw, honest. "I've spent 3 weeks trying to figure out how to fix this, how to earn back your trust, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. I can't. What I did was unforgivable." A train rumbled into the station, filling the platform with noise and light and the familiar chaos of the city's underground arteries. They sat in silence until it departed, leaving them alone again with their shared history and uncertain future. "Danny's doing better," Lark said finally. "I know. I get daily reports from his medical team. He wants to meet you." Yale went very still. "What?" "He says anyone who cares enough to send 3 dozen roses every day and make sure he has the best possible care deserves a conversation." Lark managed a small smile. "He also says I'm an idiot for letting pride keep me from the man I love." "You don't love me anymore." Yale's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "You can't, after what I did." "You're right. I can't love the man who lied to me for months and let me make a fool of myself." Lark turned to look at him, and her voice softened. "But I never stopped loving the man who laughed at my terrible jokes and carried my groceries, and remembered that his mother liked to feed ducks in Central Park." Hope flickered in Yale's expression, quickly suppressed. "I don't deserve." "No, you don't. You don't deserve forgiveness or second chances or any of the things you're probably hoping for." Lark's honesty was brutal, but necessary. "But maybe this isn't about what you deserve. Maybe it's about what we both need." "I need you," Yale said quietly. "I need you like I need air, like I need sunlight. These past 3 weeks without you have been hell. I can't eat, can't sleep, can't focus on anything except the memory of you walking away from me in that hospital." "And what are you willing to do about it?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Yale was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a conviction she'd never heard before. Whatever it takes. I'll sell the company, donate every penny I have, spend the rest of my life making amends to every person Kane Corporation ever hurt. I'll go to therapy, learn how to be the man you deserve, do whatever you need me to do. He turned to face her fully, ice-blue eyes blazing with desperate sincerity. Just tell me there's still a chance. Tell me I haven't destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Lark studied his face. This beautiful, complicated man who'd been her salvation and her destruction in equal measure. She thought about Danny's words about forgiveness, about Maya's challenge to fight for her own happiness, about Catherine's revelation that some mistakes came from fear rather than malice. I can't promise it'll be easy, she said finally. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. There'll be moments when I remember what you hid from me, and it'll hurt all over again. I know, and I won't be your redemption project. I won't be the woman who saves you from yourself because you're too broken to do the work on your own. I understand. But, Lark took a deep breath, gathering her courage. But I love you, Yale Kane. I love your terrible jokes, and your complicated relationship with emotions, and the way you look at me like I'm something precious. So maybe we can figure out how to build something real this time, something honest. The transformation in Yale's expression was like watching the sun rise. Hope bloomed across his features, followed quickly by something that looked like reverence. Are you sure? He whispered. Because if you give me another chance, I swear to you, on my mother's memory, on everything I hold sacred, I will never lie to you again. I will spend every day proving that I'm worthy of your trust. I'm not sure about anything, Lark admitted. This could be the biggest mistake of my life. But I'm tired of letting fear make my choices for me. Yale reached for her hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers intertwined with hers like they belonged there. So what happens now? He asked. Lark looked around the subway platform. This chaotic, noisy, completely unglamorous place, where their story had begun with spilled coffee and mutual embarrassment, where it might now begin again with forgiveness and the terrifying possibility of real love. Now we start over, she said. No contracts, no performances, no lies. Just two people trying to figure out if they can build something lasting out of broken pieces. I'd like that, Yale said, and his smile was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. I'd like that very much. As another train pulled into the station, filling the platform with light and noise and infinite possibility, Lark realized she was finally home. Not in any physical place, but in the space between heartbeats where love lived alongside forgiveness, where second chances grew from the ashes of first mistakes. It wouldn't be easy. Trust was a fragile thing, and they'd have to rebuild it piece by careful piece. There would be setbacks and arguments and moments when the weight of what they'd been through threatened to crush what they were trying to become. But they'd do it together, two imperfect people who'd found something worth fighting for in the chaos of a city that never stopped moving, never stopped believing in the possibility of redemption. You know, Lark said as they rose to catch the next train, hands still linked like promises they intended to keep. Who would have thought the chaos of one subway ride would lead me home? Yale's laughter echoed off the tunnel walls, real and unguarded and full of hope for whatever came next. Home, he repeated, testing the word like a prayer. I like the sound of that. As the train carried them into an uncertain but hopeful future, neither of them looked back at the platform where they'd first collided. Some endings were also beginnings, and some love stories were worth all the broken pieces it took to build them. Their fairy tale might not have started with a glass slipper or a tower to climb, but it had something better. The messy, complicated, absolutely perfect reality of two people choosing each other despite everything that should have kept them apart. In the end, that was worth more than any fantasy could ever be.